design of electronic systems for Ford, Jaguar, and Lincoln vehicles. Among his career highlights, while at Motorola, Joe was the team lead that collaborated with GM to launch OnStar. Joe is involved with the ITS America Board of Directors and the US DOT Federal Advisory Committee for ITS. And today he's going to start defining his very intriguing title, Pots to Pans.
For having me here today. Very pleased to be speaking to you. I know you probably saw the title and said Pots to Pans. I went to the tolling conference and an episode of Iron Chef broke out. But really what I want to talk about is plain old tolling systems transitioning to pretty amazing new stuff. And actually I've repurposed an old line we used to use in telephony, which was, there really was a term of art called plain old telephone service, POTS. There'd be a POTS line and the technician would talk about a 48 volt drop tip to ring and stuff like that. But I'm going to repurpose that, and we're going to talk about going from POTS to pretty amazing new stuff in the tolling industry. And I think we've heard a lot of it already. And I'm going to spend some time talking about automated vehicles. I know I'm a driving enthusiast. I like to drive. The speaker yesterday talked about it a lot. But there's a very strong case to be made for automated vehicles. I think many of us agree already it's the way of the future. But they've had a bad run over the past month or so with the pedestrian fatality in Arizona, as well as the Tesla crash on the 101, a couple of fatalities. And that's inevitable as a new technology adopts. And there are people putting a halt on testing in some areas. But I think that when we look at the numbers, we'll see that it's going to be picked up. The pace is going to increase. I think you're going to see us going further. One of my favorite quotes, I worked at Ford, and Henry Ford had the great quote of, if I'd given customers what they asked for, I would have built a faster horse. Henry Ford is great in a lot of ways in that he's a man born in 1863. He founded his company in 1903, founded Ford Motor Company. So he is 40 years old, so you can still achieve great things after 40. You don't have to found your company when you're 20. And he also was able to change the paradigm of America. I mean, this is really about disruptive change. It's not an evolutionary change. We're not going to build faster horses. We're going to change the way we travel altogether. And similarly with automated vehicles, the challenge is we're not going to be able to build better human drivers. They're just not getting better, whereas automated vehicles are getting better. And we'll talk a little bit about the testing that they're doing. The other thing that I want to point out, one of my favorite quotes is Lord Kelvin says, if it can be measured, then you understand it. And anybody who knows me knows that if I'm going to come in, there's going to be numbers involved and probably some math. So Lord Kelvin says, let's measure it, let's understand it. So this is the biggest eye chart we're going to get into today. But I think I hear people all the time, and I'm not sure, talk all the time about levels of automation. And I'm not sure that everyone understands it. Just want to level set where we are in discussing automated vehicles. And I think there's a lot of confusion and misexpectations for how they work. So, and this is what the Society of Automotive Engineers has published as their levels of automation. So zero automation is really warnings only. The car does not do anything except tell you. And one example of that is blind spot detection. Many of you might have vehicles that have blind spot detectors. Level 1 is a drive assist, and they describe that as hands-on. They want you to keep your hands on the wheel, but you have adaptive cruise control, so it's going to maintain acceleration and deceleration to maintain a safe following distance. And then you move up to partial automation, which basically does lane keeping and distance maintenance. So when you combine those two features, adaptive cruise control and lane keeping, you get to level 2 automation. And then from here it gets trickier. Level 3 is called eyes off. So the concept is that the vehicle will take complete control. You can divert your attention to other things, but you have to be ready to come back and take control of the vehicle in some defined interval. And Audi has launched a thing called Traffic Jam Pilot on their A8. It basically operates during the traffic jam. And once the car senses you're no longer in the jam, it's going to turn control over to you and say, hey driver, it's time for you to take charge. If you don't take charge, the car parks itself. It's decided that you're not being responsible. This is one of the most challenging areas because, as we've talked before, humans are not great supervisors of machines. If you have a car that's doing this, that's basically running everything for you, and you have to come back to it. It's hard for humans to come out of that mode where they're doing other things. High automation is essentially mind off. They actually define it as you can take a nap if you're in a high automation vehicle. I'm not quite ready to do that myself. But over a defined geography, you would be able to let the car take you from point A to point B. So that would be a case where, in order to accomplish this, you need not only acceleration, deceleration, and lane keeping, but you need a navigation system that can get you to point A to point B. And then full automation is what everybody's talking about. That's the holy grail here, where all modes, all geographies at level 5, you won't even need a steering wheel. There'll be many vehicles that will be produced like this. The thing with level 4, I think we're actually looking at a level 4 environment for most toll roads. As some of the previous speakers have talked, the toll roads are typically well instrumented. They're controlled access. You don't have pedestrians crossing them. So we could certainly get to a point where for entire stretches of your toll road, we could have the car drive itself. But let's talk numbers, and let's talk about how humans perform when they're driving. So 2016 data is the most recent data produced by NHTSA, and there are over 37,000 fatalities involved in 34,000 crashes. So the question is, and that's a 5.6% increase over 2015. So the numbers are getting higher. Humans are not getting better at driving, as you can see. Now you might think, well, that's due to increased miles traveled, increased economic activity. That's what's driving this trend. But the fact is that the key statistic they track is fatality rate per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. And in 2014, it was at 1.08. And in 2016, it's at 1.18. Now we're going to see what the stats from 2017 tell us, but the trend is going the wrong way. We have these initiatives to achieve 0 fatalities, but we don't seem to be getting at the core of this, which is 37,000 people a year are dying. I think the lowest year we had was something like 2011. There was a very low number of miles traveled due to the recovery from the recession, but we don't seem to be able to crack that number. Comparatively, and this is what people compare us to, I mean, commercial airliner travel is extraordinarily safe in the US. So for the years 2014, 15, 16, 17, 0 deaths on commercial airline travel in the United States. Of course, that changed last week with the tragedy on the flight, the Southwest Airlines flight, but this is what people's expectations are going to be headed toward. People think that we have the capacity to do this if we just apply technology. So what drives those numbers? There's about 3.2 trillion miles driven. This is about 260 million cars doing about 12,000 miles a year. There's about 6.3 million crashes. Now this is not all fatality crashes, this is all crashes. There's 6.3 million police reported crashes, and they estimate another 10 million that go unreported. And so there are crashes about every 200,000 miles. That's human drivers are crashing with that frequency. The automated vehicle manufacturers would tell you they can beat this number right now. I mean, and beat it by a long shot. Because cars are simply better at keeping you in the lane and avoiding collisions with obstacles around them. The question we have as a society is, how big does this number have to get for an automated vehicle? Does it have to be a 2x improvement over humans, a 10x improvement? Or are we just in a phase here where we're working issues out as far as this, as far as what's an acceptable crash rate and fatality rate? And 94% of crashes are related to human choices. It's humans making decisions because we're not that good at determining the speed of the oncoming vehicle, determining which way the driver's going, determining their exact location. All the things an automated or connected vehicle can do very, very well. Remember in driver's ed, and they always told you it's a 0.75 second reaction time from the time you see the thing till you hit the brake. And they also told you 1 car length for every 10 mile per hour. So if you're traveling at 60 miles an hour, you should have about 100-foot separation between you and the car in front of you. Which is the math is interesting. It does kind of work because at 60 miles per hour, you got about 66 feet from the time you actually apply the brake, and then you have time for the brake to slow you down. But the problem is, who's allowing 1 car length per 10 mile per hour? Is anybody doing that? Because I know I want you out of my lane because I got to fill that gap. You know, that's how everybody thinks. I mean, if you do allow a 100-foot gap between you and the car in front of you, it's going to get filled. I mean, that happens all the time. And are people really driving 60 miles an hour? I mean, I know we have, 65 mile per hour speed limit. Everybody's going 10 over that. So the other thing is that 0.75 seconds is just a guideline, right? I mean, the reality is that response time is a distribution. Some people are better, some people are worse. It depends on impairment, cognitive load, the driver's ability and experience. I always think of it in terms of, imagine a teenage male, he's got the radio turned up, he's texting his friends while he's got 2 buddies in the back seat. He's driving, making decisions, versus, say, Dale Earnhardt Jr. We're in NASCAR country. At the other end of the spectrum is a highly skilled driver that can manage a lot of issues and still navigate the car. But the problem is, the road isn't full of Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s. It's full of people that are texting and engaging in other things that are distracting them. Talk a little bit about pedestrian fatalities, and this is also humans caused almost 6,000 pedestrian fatalities in 2016, and this is an increase of 9%. Part of this is a migration to the urban core. There are more people walking in walkable neighborhoods, and they're meeting up with cars. Part of it, one of the trends that people are also distracted walking with their phones, not paying attention to the environment around them. What's also interesting for pedestrians is automakers, we spent a lot of money trying to put airbags in place. You have front seat airbags, rear seat airbags, you have the curtain airbags. So they've done great things to protect the driver, and so the percentage of pedestrians killed in traffic collisions is going up as a percent of the total because their world hasn't changed at all. They're not really any benefit from technology yet. If you look at where Waymo is, and California has the most exhaustive requirements as far as reporting travel, but Waymo has 5 million miles traveled in their fleet. So it's not nearly a big enough number yet, but it's pretty convincing because they have not really had a major crash yet. Their biggest challenge, when you look at the taxonomy of crashes, it's typically I'm at an intersection, I can't judge the distance coming toward me, it's a lane change, it's a road departure, and the other one is rear ends. Those are the 4 major taxonomies. And Waymo experiences a ton of rear-end collisions. I don't know about a ton, several is what they've experienced. That's because their car is simply stopping more quickly than humans behind them are anticipating. So if you were assessing blame, they don't really stop. They don't really have that issue. Lastly, I want to talk about educating people. Part of the challenge, I think, is that the industry hasn't done a good job of educating people. MIT conducted a study that looked at, they asked people to identify what does this feature do? And this was the percent correct by respondents. So adaptive cruise control is the one that's best understood because people have experience with it. But autopilot, for instance, people presume that if you have a feature called autopilot, it's taking you from here to there with no intervention. You can play chess or watch a movie or whatever. And that's really not what the feature is intended to do. Super Cruise by Cadillac, similar. So when you look at these percentages, when people had like 5 choices to pick from, a lot of these are no better than guessing when you look at that. So with that, I think the key is to not overreact to news stories, understand what the numbers are saying, and the numbers saying that we're going to get better and better. Waymo just did their 5th millionth mile. They're now doing about 1 million miles every month, so that report will continue to improve. And we'll finally get a good set of data. And I also don't necessarily pay attention to what's happened with in the public media. Wait for the NTSB report, say, for instance, on Tempe, and always follow the numbers. And with that, back to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. We're going to move right along to our next speaker.
Cool.
If you have any questions for Joe, please find him afterwards right outside, and